Hello, everyone. I'm really excited for our conversation today because this is actually a brand new topic that I've never discussed before on any platform, but it's something that is so important. So today we are going to discuss the most common muscle groups that MS tends to attack. As we all know, multiple sclerosis is different for every person that has it. That's why it's nicknamed the snowflake disease. But it does tend to attack specific muscle groups. And for some people, that might mean that their muscle group is weak. For others, it might mean that it's tight. So we're going to cover not only just what muscle groups MS tends to attack, but what will happen if it's weak or if it's tight, and exercises that you can do if it's weak or tight. So before we dive in, if you don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Gretchen Hawley, a physical therapist and MS certified specialist. As I mentioned, we are going to be talking about leg muscles in MS, specifically understanding weakness and tightness. So a quick overview, we are going to learn the 5 key muscle groups that MS tends to attack or affect. We're going to understand the signs and weakness, or signs of weakness versus tightness, because those are 2 different things and they need to be treated differently. We'll discover how these muscles affect your walking and things like stair climbing and just general movement throughout the day. And then learning exercises to improve the strength and or reduce the tightness. So a quick recap before we dive into the specific muscle groups and what that means for you is we do need to understand what neuroplasticity means, and more specifically, how it relates to strengthening a muscle. When you have MS and when you're experiencing muscular weakness or muscular tightness, we often think that the problem is in the muscle. And you're not wrong. That is where the problem is, but it's not because of the muscle. The problem actually originates in the neural pathway. So the way that any muscle needs to work is, first and foremost, our brain needs to have the thought or the reflex to move a muscle. Then, after our brain has that thought or reflex, in order to get to the muscle, that message has to travel down a bunch of neural pathways. So pathways from your brain down to that muscle. And in MS, that is where the problem lies. That neural pathway, or lack thereof, is the reason that you have muscle weakness or muscle tightness. And therefore, if you've tried regular physical therapy, regular exercise, traditional PT, and it hasn't worked for you, that's usually because you're focusing on muscle strengthening, muscle stretching, and forgetting about the neural component that connects your brain to your muscles. So we have to consider that when we're talking about MS. We will still be strengthening muscles, we will still be stretching muscles, but in a way where it's conducive to improving our neural pathways, which again is the connection between our brain and any muscle that we're working on. And that's the power of neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to strengthen those neural pathways or find a brand new neural pathway if the original one wasn't working. So another quick recap, because hopefully you know what neuroplasticity is, we've talked about this before, is to remind yourself that your brain can strengthen current existing neural pathways. So if you go to move your leg, and it does move, but it doesn't move as well as the other side. Maybe it feels heavier, maybe it feels harder, maybe it doesn't move as much. That is a sign that your neural pathway for that muscle is there and it's working, but it's not as effective as it used to be. Neuroplasticity is the ability to strengthen that neural pathway so that it does get to be as strong as it used to be, or at least closer to where you are, from where you are now. Neuroplasticity is also the ability to find new neural pathways. So if I were to tell you to lift your leg and nothing happens, that means that the neural pathway from your brain down to lifting your leg is not there, or it's not working. And so neuroplasticity is the ability of your brain to find a different way to get from point A to point B, being your leg. So it does both of those things. Strong neural pathways equals strong muscles. Movement quality matters more than quantity. Consistency is key, and start in easy positions. When we're talking about exercising and when we get to the examples today, the easier it is for you to do, the better. So often people think that modifying to do an exercise in a different position or making it easier is cheating. And that is not the case at all. That couldn't be further from the truth. The best way to strengthen your neural pathways and to find new neural pathways is through repetition of the desired movement. So if you can't do a lot of repetitions because the exercise is too hard, then you're not giving yourself too many opportunities to find or strengthen that neural pathway. But if you modify and you do that exercise in an easier position, therefore you can do lots of repetitions, that's lots of opportunities for your brain to strengthen or find a neural pathway. So for any exercise that we talk about today, if you find a way to modify, absolutely go for it. That is not cheating. It is a good thing. You want your exercises to feel as easy as possible. So the 5 muscle groups that we're going to be discussing are the hip flexors, the knee flexors, knee extensors, ankle dorsiflexors, and your calf muscles or your plantar flexors. Ankle dorsiflexors is our next muscle group that MS tends to attack. These are the muscles on the front of our ankle, and these are responsible for lifting our toes and the front of our foot upward. So you might be thinking, hopefully, that if lifting your ankle or foot is hard, that is often a big reason for foot drop. So if you have foot drop, this might be something that you're struggling with. So the ankle dorsiflexors, front of our ankle, responsible for lifting our toes, lifting our forefoot up. It's also responsible for controlling our foot placement during walking so that your foot lands and slowly rolls forward instead of slapping. Ankle dorsiflexors are essential for clearing your foot during the swing phase of walking, preventing tripping, controlling your foot placement when walking and on stairs, and initial contact when walking. Your heel should hit the ground first. So when your ankle dorsiflexors are weak, you will likely notice foot drop, toe drag, foot slap, foot drag. There's so many different names for it, but if any of those are words you've heard before, it is likely due to a component of weak ankle dorsiflexors. You might notice increased tripping, scuffing your toes when walking, slapping your foot down when walking. If you can hear your foot slap the ground with every step, weak ankle dorsiflexors, and difficulty going downstairs as well. If your ankle dorsiflexors are weak, are tight, and this is definitely less common, but it can happen. If they are tight, you will notice limited ankle range of motion. So instead of being able to freely lift your ankle, even with your hand, you'll notice you can't move your ankle as much because it's too tight. It may affect your balance, it may affect stair climbing, and it may cause ankle pain. So some exercises that we can do for weak or tight ankles is seated ankle dorsiflexion, standing heel raises, ankle pumps, and then considering some type of ankle brace, whether that's an ankle foot orthosis, an AFO, or a brace like the Dictus band or Elevate 360. So let's do some of those exercises. My favorite exercise of all time for weak ankle dorsiflexors, and before we even do that, ankle dorsiflexors are the front of our ankle. They're right in this area on both sides. So if those are weak, our toes are likely to stay down and lifting is going to be hard. So one of the best things we can do is practice lifting them. So if If we have weakness here, we want to practice lifting, but it's going to be much harder to do that when your knees are at 90 degrees. So you can extend your knees a bit and then lift from there. You can lift one side at a time or both at the same time. You don't have to lift as high as I'm going. You could just lift the tiniest bit, but lifting is going to be a great exercise to strengthen those muscles on the front of your ankle. So I often do this in a seated position, not standing. Standing is likely you lose your balance, but this is what it would look like if you're going back and forth. This is what it would look like if you're doing them at the same time. And up and down, slow and steady, slow on the way up, little pause, slow on the way down. So that's a great strengthening exercise. Now, when it comes to tight ankle dorsiflexors, this would mean that if your ankle is stuck in this flexed position and it's really hard to let your foot down, then some stretches and movement is what can be great. So something like grabbing your hand and just doing some ankle circles or ankle pumps. You can move up and down, in and out. There's no right or wrong, just get your ankle moving and you can go the other direction. And then you can also massage the ankle dorsiflexor. So using this hand, you're going to massage those muscles and tendons right on the front of your ankle. You could even come up a little bit higher as well. So anywhere in this range is good, fair game to massage, rub around, whatever feels good for you. There's no specific motion that you should be doing, but just trying to loosen those muscles up. One of the exercises that I mentioned that could be helpful is calf raises, but we're going to save that for our next muscle group. For now, the ankle dorsiflexors and lifting like this is going to be the best for strengthening. Massage and moving around can be great for mobility. And then the last stretch is simply pulling your toes away. So if you have tightness up top, you pull down and point your toes down, and that can feel like a really great stretch. There's lots of things that you can do for your toes. Oftentimes, if your toes are curling when you're standing, it's due to poor balance. So working on balance can be helpful. My feet roll side to side. What muscle is that? That's more of the outside of your calf muscles, or outside of your calf, your peroneal or fibular muscles. So when you have weak ankle dorsiflexors, you should work on strengthening your ankle dorsiflexors. By doing that, you're also working to create new neural pathways or strengthening neural pathways that already exist but are weakened. Drop foot can happen due to ankle dorsiflexors being weak or tight calf muscles and or weak hip flexors and or weak knee flexors. So many different reasons. So it really depends on what the cause is, which could be lots of the things that we talked about today. So starting some of those exercises and seeing where are the big problem areas for you. So the last muscle group that we're going to review are your calf muscles. So your calf muscles are the muscles on the back of your lower leg. Most people know where our calf muscles are, but if you're looking down at your heel, the muscles right above your heel that hold back of your lower leg, those are your calf muscles. Those are the muscles that are responsible for lifting your heel, aka toes are pointing down and heel is up. This is an extremely important movement when we're talking about walking. A big component of taking a step forward is being able to push off of your back leg. That's what your calf muscles primarily help with when walking. So it's essential for propelling us, keep propulsion in moving in a forward direction, staying balanced during standing and walking, climbing stairs, and rising up on our toes. So when our calf muscles are weak, you will notice that pushing off as you're walking forward during a gait cycle can be challenging. You have difficulty with balance, difficulty climbing stairs. You may compensate with hip hiking, and I'll demonstrate what that looks like too. When your calf muscles are tight, you might notice limited ankle mobility because you can't lift it as high. You have increased foot drop or foot slap. You might have difficulty getting your heel down. You might have knee hyperextension or locking, and balance problems because our calves help us stay balanced. So some exercises that you can do for your calves are heel raises, seated or standing, calf stretches, and balance exercises. So let's review those. Our calf muscles are the muscles on the back of our lower leg. They run from behind our knee all the way down to our heel. They are responsible for our heels coming up and toes pointing down, which, as I mentioned, is an important point of walking right here. As I'm going to take a step forward, this is the push-off phase of gait, where my heel comes up, my toes are down, and then I bring my leg through. So pushing off is where we need our calf muscles. So if you have weakness, that can be really hard. So an exercise that you can do is standing heel raises, where you're standing, core is tight, and you lift up and down, slowly on the way up and slowly on the way down. When you're doing those seated, it might look like this. Slowly on the way up, slowly on the way down, controlled. So it's the same exercise, you're just sitting instead of standing. Now, if your calf muscles are tight, you want to do a calf stretch. I really like doing calf stretches with tools to help me out, and specifically non-stretchy tools. So not a resistance band, not resistance tubing, but something like a cane or a yoga strap that is taut, it's not stretchy. And you're going to straighten your leg, ideally straightening your knee as well, and then putting a non-stretchy object under the balls of your feet and pulling towards you. The tighter your calf muscles are, the more your toes are going to want to stay down. So we're pulling our toes up to stretch our calf. Ideally, you'd feel that stretch anywhere behind your knee, all the way down to behind your heel. And you're going to pull towards you. If you have foot drop or foot slap, foot drag, it's often a combination of tightness in your calf muscles and weakness on the front, the ankle dorsiflexors like we just discussed. So there are two calf muscles, a soleus muscle and the gastrocnemius or gastroc muscle. Those are two calf muscles. The way that you stretch the gastroc muscle is what you just saw me do, where your knee is fully straight and you pull your toes towards you. The way to stretch the soleus is the same stretch, but bend your knee. With the knee bent, you're going to get more of the soleus stretch. When you're standing, your knees are straight, and when you're sitting, your knees are bent. So that can make doing exercises standing or sitting very different in terms of how challenging they are for you, because your knees are in a different position and therefore your muscles are in a different position. So for you, when you're standing, when your knees are straight, when your muscles are straight, it's easier for you to use. But when your knees are bent and your muscles are bent, it's harder for you. So it's because of the alignment and what position your muscles are in when you're starting the exercise. So putting all of this together, when we are talking about walking and climbing stairs, it requires all of these muscle groups that we talked about and more. It also requires our hip extensors, our core muscles, so many other muscles. But when we're talking about walking, our hip flexors are the muscles that bring our leg forward. Our knee extensors straighten our knee so that we can put our leg down forward, and it supports us during our stance phase where that leg is on the ground. The knee flexors allows us to bend our knee. Our ankle dorsiflexors allows us to lift our foot. Our calf muscle allows us to push forward. So all of these muscles are required to have strength and flexibility for us to take a single step forward, let alone multiple steps forward, and climb stairs and getting in and out of the shower, our car, etc. They are so important, and they are often the muscles that MS tends to attack and affect. So when we're thinking about what muscles should we be strengthening or stretching, there's lots of muscles to strengthen and stretch. What I would recommend doing is go through each of the things that we've discussed. Lifting your leg up, straightening your knee, bending your knee, and seeing which feels challenging. Maybe it's all of them, maybe it's just some of them, and start with some of the exercises that we've discussed and go from there. Once those start feeling easier, then you can add some other things. When it comes to walking, stairs, etc., we use our hip flexors, our knee extensors, knee flexors, ankle dorsiflexors, calf muscles for every single step of those movements. Exercise guidelines that I want to leave you with today. When to strengthen. Start with the most challenging muscles first. Oftentimes, I find that if you're starting with the most challenging muscles first, while it might feel defeating and discouraging because it's really hard to strengthen and move them, it can be really eye-opening of how much strength is needed. And I would encourage you to feel a sense of pride that you're choosing to isolate that muscle and really focus on strengthening the specific muscle that you're noticing that weakness in. You're more likely to notice a bigger bang for your buck in terms of exercise when you focus on those specific muscles. Quality over quantity. It's not about how many repetitions you can do, but how many good quality repetitions you can do. You can do an aerobic exercise first, get your heart rate up. That can prime your brain for neuroplasticity, take breaks as needed, and practice in functional positions when possible. When to stretch, when your muscles feel tight or spastic. Generally speaking, you want to hold for 20 to 30 seconds if you're doing a typical static stretch. If that doesn't feel good for you, a way that you can stretch is dynamic stretching, where you only hold for about 2 to 3 seconds and you would just do more repetitions, maybe 30 repetitions. Or you can do a prolonged static. So you might hold for 5 to 7 minutes before you release and do a different stretch, and focus on problem areas. One thing I frequently hear from my clients is, Dr. Gretchen, I stretch all day long, but I'm still so spastic. My knee still doesn't bend. And every time I ask the client who's saying this, great, what stretches are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. They'll mention a ton of stretches, but not one of them is for the specific thing that they are trying to alleviate. So, for example, I had a patient who said that the muscles on the front of her thigh, her quadricep muscles, were so tight. Nothing she does is helping. She's stretching all day long. She told me her stretches, not one of them was a quad stretch. So of course they're not feeling any better. So focus on the problem areas, and hopefully after today's discussion, you feel like you know where those problem areas might be, and you have some exercises for those specific problem areas. I hope you found this helpful. This is a lot of information all at once. And again, MS can attack any muscle. These are just some of the most common ones that MS tends to attack, causing weakness and or tightness. So hopefully you now feel like you've got some tools in your toolbox of helping you navigate and figure out what might actually be going on with your muscles, and some tools to help you overcome that. If you are looking to reach me anywhere, here's some resources. My Missing Link book is the book I published that reviews all strategies similar to these and much more. My website is missinglink.com if you want to work with me or are curious about any other resources I have. And I also have an app called The Missing Link. And I also have Instagram and YouTube channel. There's also Facebook, podcast. I'm all over, but these are some of the most common platforms that people find me on. Thank you for you guys for tuning in and learning with me. Have a great rest of your day.